Hi folks, this is Jake. Hope you're okay today. We're looking at Arguments from Silence by Craig Blomberg. Craig Blomberg says, not long ago an unsolicited email asked me to comment on a skeptic's blog site that had posted a list about 20 historians from the Jewish, Greek and Roman worlds around the time of Christ. Not one of them ever mentioned Jesus, the blogger pointed out. Surely that should cast serious doubt on whether the Jesus Christian worship ever existed. It was an intriguing list. There were a few names I didn't recognise that I had to look up, but most were indeed ancient writers from one of those three cultures. The trouble was that only about a third of them could be legitimately called historians. One was an ancient taxonomist who wrote about flora and fauna. A couple were writers on medicine or ancient science. Two were geographers. Several were poets and playwrights. Of those who were truly historians, several indeed live around the time of Christ, but just a little bit before him. Gee, I wonder why they never mentioned him. Several others were actually 2nd or 3rd century writers, not writing about life in Israel at all, but about other parts of the Roman Empire. In short, there wasn't a single name on the list for which there would have been good reason for Jesus even to have been mentioned. Yeah, the argument from silence is an argument that a lot of skeptics use against Christianity and historical Jesus studies. They say, well, what about the historians of Jesus' time? They didn't mention him. And like Craig Blomberg, an eminent scholar, has just shown that this kind of argument is silly when you actually deconstruct it. Many of these ancient writers came either before Jesus, so they're not going to mention him because they came before him, or they were very late afterwards, so they're not going to mention him much because they were interested in other issues, not Israel, but maybe the Roman Empire or whatever. Most of them weren't historians, so why would they mention Jesus anyway? The main thing about the argument of silence is just because someone doesn't mention Jesus or someone doesn't mention something about the Gospels doesn't necessarily mean it didn't happen. For example, one explorer once went to, I think it was Marco Polo or someone like that, went to visit China, and when he visited China he came back, he never mentioned about the Chinese Wall. Does that mean the Chinese Wall doesn't exist? Another example is Philo, who lived, who was in his prime in the time of Gamaliel. Alexandrian scholar, goes to Jerusalem, comes back from Jerusalem, but doesn't mention the great scholar Gamaliel. Does that mean Gamaliel doesn't exist? So arguments of silence are not very good, and most historians don't use it. There's lots of evidence from ancient historians of Jesus' time that tells us Jesus did exist, and so you've got to be intellectually honest and fair. Tacitus, Josephus, Thallus, Suetonius and others. Okay.